Just a bit of a background. So the characters here are Filipino transgender women from the Philippines. We call them trans Pinay. And one is an NHS nurse, and then the other is an undocumented migrant living in London. So they are mambabarang. In our culture, mambabarang, I think the closest translation is sorceress. So, if you're familiar with the Philippines, it's an archipelago. The islands in the center of the Philippines. So we have that culture that we have powerful women who can heal the sick, but can also inflict pain and kill someone using magic. So that's part of our culture. So these women, trans Pinay, in a very unusual rendezvous, after 30 years, they are arch enemies. They met in Holborn. So I'm going to introduce them to you tonight. So this is London from the universe of the Filipino migrants living in this country. So radicalization of a woman without a wing. Inday tried to catch her eyes to lock their gazes, a common practice of people like them in the archipelago. The eyes had a double function, to see and to reveal, to see the enemy and to reveal the self to an ally. I know you, finally she said when the woman pressed the button to signal the driver to halt the bus at the next station at Holborn. They were sitting facing each other, and I know you can still remember me. The woman was an old enemy. Her coach bag lying on her lap and a lanyard dangling on her neck when her NHS ID still attached to it, revealing to her that she probably came from a night shift in a hospital somewhere in southeast London. That morning, she was on her way to a client at Dalston Junction, to a widower she fancied to be a potential husband. Marriage, that thing she believed to be the last resort, could document her existence in this country. Tucker, Mr. Tucker, that's the man's name, could give her a paper. But she isn't like the woman in front of her. You killed her. At last, Inday said it in their own language so that the two old white women sitting beside each of them wouldn't understand her. Kill in this country had a different meaning. It was not just a performance, it was a heinous crime. She doesn't want to invite any troubles from locals, especially white people whom she could not trust. I told you to forgive her and move on and just find another man who can love you, but still you refuse to let go. Her name, and this was still clear to Inday, was Milagros. Inday could still remember how the poor young waitress, before her last breath was extinguished from her body, and spoke Milagros' name. The dying girl's mouth agape and was agape and ready to swallow this world and bring it to her in another world. Inday could still remember the scenes with the poor waitress. Tell me your name, puñeta, animal. She had never run out of expletive just to let Milagros reveal her name from the poor girl's mouth. Two men were holding her hands and their knees pressed against her legs. Tell me your name, hija de puta, or I will call death to fetch your mother here in Dumaguete. Inday had known it was Milagros. She could read the style and the level of craftsmanship. The girl in her early 20s rolled like a mad dog. Her gums started to bleed, but still she refused to speak her name. Milagros, the mambabarang possessing her body. The girl started to cuss in Latin. Inday took from her old rucksack a sun-dried quill, tails of manta rays, and hit the girl first at her neck, then several times on the flesh between her breast. Her roars became louder, maddening, every time the tail hit her body, until Milagros, inside the girl's body, eventually gave up and shouted her name. That moment, the possessor revealed its name as also the end of its power over the possessed. Possession for people like them had power only in anonymity. Even shadows for them had names. I know you, Milagros. I know where you live. I know where to find your mother here in Dumaguete. I know your real name. Now let this girl go in peace and let her live. Her real name was Marla. A cracking sound of 1,000 bamboos being violently crushed enveloped the room. All the bones inside the girl's body were being dismantled by Milagros. The act was being done from her hut across the sea in another island facing Dumaguete, Siquijor. Her rage was unforgiving. Nemo mi impune, she said, puñeta. The girl's eyes started to dilate. A white sticky ball of rice came out from her mouth and landed on her lap. Before she gave her last breath, she bid goodbye to her mother, praying the rosary sitting at the corner of the room. Inday failed and Milagros won. It was almost 3 decades ago. The bus stopped at the station. Their eyes were transfixed on the window looking at the same direction where people lining up outside Burger King, and the street was in total disarray for pedestrians running to cross the road to Holborn or to the tube station across the street. The bus door closed and Milagros remained on her seat. You killed my mother. At last she spoke, clutching her expensive bag to her breast. They found a spoon in her stomach. She always ate with her hands. The girl's mother asked me to retaliate. You took her only child. This is how the world keeps its balance, Marlon. She called her former name as an offensive attack. I know your real name too, Ignacio. It was not defense for Milagros. It was a retaliation. You never changed. Of course, she retorted and cut her in condescension. Of course, I did not change at all after all those decades since I killed that bitch. She examined Milagros' face and realized her youthful beauty never left her after all those years. Her cheeks were red with makeup, her fingers were still plump, smooth like candlestick, and the absence of varicose veins in her hands prompted her to think Milagros was still practicing the craft here in London. Look at you, Ignacio, an old bag of bones and tired facts. You abandoned the practice. Since when? No, that is not the question. This is to remind you that you can never escape the past, even if you are here. You are a monster, Milagros. I know you're still killing people, feeding them with poison to keep your looks. You think you can get away with this? They will send you back home and they'll catch you. Milagros gave a loud mocking laugh. I have papers here. And looking at you, you are not legal here. Why don't you lure a British man to marry you so you'll get a visa? Look at me. The bus stopped at Red Lion Street. Milagros stood up and put her sunglasses on. I can call the Home Office to get the immigration police to pick you up, send you back to the Philippines. You are a disgrace to your mother, to her ancestors who are living on my island. And Milagros alighted the bus to walk back to Holborn. It was 30 years ago, and I thought, it was a very long time since she abandoned the craft. Like Milagros, she was also a Mambabarang, but from another island. But unlike Milagros, somewhere in her life she decided to change, to live a different life, to be elsewhere. But after 3 decades, an unusual rendezvous with an old self of her past, in London of all places, made her realize and believe she made the right decision to abandon the craft. A commotion as the passengers drew their eyes to the middle of the door of the red bus. She saw Milagros outside, hysterically banging the door with her hands, asking the driver to open it for her. She was pleading for the passenger inside the bus to open the door, but the bus driver, being the master of the lives of those inside this red beast, ignored her. She saw Milagros kneeling on the pavement and was hysterical, bobbing her head while talking relentlessly, at least blaming her hands for the mistake. It was at the blue of a typical London roadside tragedy as she saw a bystander at the station looking with disinterested eyes at Milagros as the red bus moved away to Asia. Excuse me, the old woman sitting beside Milagros' seat called Indai's attention. I think this belongs to your friend. The woman was holding an oyster card. Oh, thank you, madame, she said as she took Milagros' possession, smiling. I will return this to her tonight. In her mind, of course, she missed performing the craft. She decided to return to her past life tonight in a fabulous comeback. by killing Milagros. I will kill her tonight, that bitch, she thought as she carefully put the oyster card in her bag. Thank you very much.